Hey guys, welcome back to Resistance Chicks. I am one of your hosts, Michelle. We are waiting on the Arizona hearing and we will play it live as soon as it starts. But since I have some extra time, I've got the chat popped up on YouTube. Oh my gosh, everybody's here. And I'm going to do some sound checks and make sure that we have everything ready. And I'm going to share it on Facebook. Open up the Facebook people. I hope you guys are having a good day. I'm super excited about today's hearing. If you guys were with us on November 30th, it's not coming up for me to share on Facebook yet. If you guys were with us on November 30th for what happened was Rudy Giuliani and Trump's team went to Arizona, and Arizona would not hold an official hearing in either their Senate or their House. And so a bunch of the Republican members got together and decided to hold their own public hearing, essentially. And I was blown away. I did not think we were going to get that much out of Arizona and the witnesses there. It was mind-blowing. So now, Senator, I can't ever say his name right, and Leah can't either, Finkum, was able to put together it's still not letting me share it with a watch party, an actual Senate hearing. Now, this is going to be a little bit different. I'll wait until the video starts. We can wait a minute, see if that comes up. Because we will have Democrats and Republicans listening to this and asking questions. If you were with us in Wisconsin last week, I think, was that just Friday? It was brutal to start with because the Democrats were angry. They came with their talking points. They decided to not actually show up and to be there via Zoom, which made it so they couldn't get called on as easily. And they were really angry, and they were saying, we're being silenced and yada, yada, yada. Well, one of the actual Republicans that was there came out and said, well, I said something to the effect of, if you had decided to show up to work, then this might not, you might not be having these issues. And they were saying, how much they resented that because we're in the middle of a pandemic and all of that. And I just thought it was really funny. So that was rather enjoyable. I'll tell you what has me a little bit disturbed is that Right Side Broadcasting is not planning on showcasing this. And if they are, it's not up on their videos, which could be YouTube censoring them. I know many times I have scheduled a stream and it won't show up for you guys when you come to my actual page on YouTube. So I'm going to continue to look and make sure while you guys are here that no one else has this up so that we don't miss it. I cannot imagine it streaming and NTD not actually showcasing it if they are able to do so. So yeah, obviously NTD is the only one. It's funny though, because when I put Arizona hearing in for today, even mine doesn't show up. We are so censored, guys. It's not even funny. Here's someone else. Viral culture. Let me pull them up and see if they have it. Yeah, no, they don't. They don't have it either. I guess we'll just wait on NTD because really we don't have any other choice, do we? I guess I could put it in my tags and see if we show up there. I haven't, honestly guys, I have not been putting I haven't been putting anything in our tags. because tags flag you for stuff, but we'll go ahead and Arizona hearing, Arizona hearings. We'll even do this, Arizona hearing today. There we go. All right, so while we're waiting on them, a little bit of news that Leah just shared with me. NTD is already streaming. Okay, well, but if they are, why isn't this, are they streaming on another place?
Overturn the election.
I needed to refresh.
Those on the right that will decry it as being inadequate to bring justice to a tainted system replete with fraud. And there will be those who will claim that it merely is for show in an attempt by the Arizona legislature to appear engaged. Let me assure you, it is none of the above. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution vests the legislature with plenary authority to direct the manner in which the electors are appointed. To exercise this authority, the legislature must be in session. The Arizona Constitution sets forth two paths for the legislature to come into a special session. Number one, under Article 4, Part 2, Section 1 of the Arizona Constitution, 2/3 of the legislators may call themselves into session. And under Article 4, Part 2, Section 3, the governor may call the legislature into session. In a partisan election, is it impossible to get legislators to exercise their authority under Article 4? And Governor Ducey has refused to exercise his authority to enable the legislature to act as a body to ensure the current election was conducted in a fair and open manner. That brings us to today's hearing. Though the entire legislature with its full constitutional authority has been unable to convene, this standing committee has the authority to meet, albeit with a more constrained and limited authority. However, notwithstanding its limited authority, there is value in holding this hearing. The goal today is narrow and specific. Number one, we desire to educate the public concerning the election process that has been established by the legislature and delegated to the counties to educate the public on the safeguards that are in place and the steps taken by the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors to ensure the law was followed and the election was fair. Secondly, to understand how the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors will restore faith in the process. And number three, to understand what steps the Arizona Attorney General has taken to ensure the election was fair and to restore faith in the election process. I want to make it clear that although we are limiting this hearing to Maricopa County as the largest county in Arizona and the county that cast the majority of votes in Arizona, we ask the same questions of all Arizona's other counties. Now, I want to make it also clear that this meeting is not an indictment on the County Board of Supervisors or any process that exists. What we want to do is get to the truth. And to do that, we are holding this hearing, and we hope to get through the presentations, through the questions asked and the answers given, we hope to come closer to the truth and understanding of whether this election had problems or did not have problems, including the question of fraud. So with that, we are going to hear from individuals from the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. I believe they have their attorney here, Mr. Liddy, and also their elections director. We're going to start with them, and then we're going to talk to the AG and the AG's representatives who are here. So are there any questions before we get going? Mr. Leach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's just a process question. Is it your desire that we hold questions until the end of the presentations or take questions, so to speak, on the run?
I don't have a problem asking questions in real time. If the presenter thinks that it's going to confuse them or they want to wait till the end, they can ask that. Otherwise, I'm fine with you asking questions whenever the question pops in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions before we get started? All right, I think first and foremost, we have Chairman Clint Hickman, who is here, or online, I should say. Used to saying here, but online. So we'd like to hear from Chairman Hickman. Hello.
Hello.
Chairman, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, I wish that I could see all of you in person. I know the pandemic presents that or prevents that right now. I'm used to testifying in committees and getting to see all of you, and we can learn a lot by just being able to appear and talk to each other face to face. But I guess Zoom is just going to have to do right now at these times. I want to thank you for inviting me here today. And Mr. Leach just pointed out something that I would prefer to get through a statement first before questions. The turn of a phrase, the using of different words mean a lot to different people. So I felt most people that know me that I like to speak off the cuff, but on something of such import, I thought I'd just like to make a statement for my board first.
Please proceed.
Great. I'm pleased to be here to talk about Maricopa County's successful November 3rd general election. First, I want to tell you about the steps Maricopa County took to ensure the integrity and success of all of Maricopa County's 2020 elections. So far, there's been 3 of them: presidential preference election, the primary election, and the general, all of which run by the same people, running through the same machines, using the same workers for the most part. In January of this year, in my chairman's address, I, along with my fellow supervisors, made elections a priority. We hired more staff, and we significantly increased funding to the elections department. One of the biggest priorities was complete and total transparency in how we would run and operate Maricopa County's 2020 elections. To that end, at the beginning of the year, we invited all of the state's legislators to tour our facility and view our equipment. And some of you, both in the House and the Senate, took advantage of seeing our new processes and procedures. We also held open hearings at the start of this process and had open hearings before the start of every single election in 2020. For the first time ever in Maricopa County, we published detailed elections plans. And after every election, we had post-election analysis through the canvass, including for the canvass after the November 3rd election. In fact, the Board of Supervisors had a 2.5-hour hearing discussing in detail the integrity and security of that election. And I'm pretty sure that you received a copy of that canvass. I hope you all had a chance to watch it, because I think some of the questions you might have for me today could have been answered in that canvass, I hope. I want to be clear. The Maricopa County Board of Supervisors respects the Arizona legislature and its constitutional powers. Allegations have been made nationally about last-minute changes that were made because of COVID, and that those changes were not consistent with other states' elections laws. Some have alleged that in doing so, those states' elections were rendered more vulnerable to fraud. I am not here to testify about the veracity of those allegations, but I can tell you that those things did not happen in Maricopa County. When changes were needed, we went to the legislature. And in fact, you did make changes this year. For instance, the changes made concerning electronic adjudication. That was the first bill that went through the House, the Senate, and signed by the governor. It was that important. The Maricopa County Board of Supervisors knows we do not have this authority to go outside of Title 16. Now, because of COVID-19, we did have to make some changes so that all Maricopa County residents who wanted to vote could vote securely and safely. But all those COVID-19 related changes were already within the legislative structure. Indeed, we directed our election department staff to design a model that could respond to COVID and stay within legislative parameters. If a legislative change was needed, we would have asked. There's been a lot of discussion about conducting a forensic audit on Maricopa County's equipment. First, I can assure you, security and transparency are paramount to Maricopa County elections. Last week, a federal case that was dismissed on Wednesday afternoon, the judge could have required further discovery under short deadlines related to the election. I directed staff to research and prepare for a forensic audit if that occurred. Maricopa County invited a federally certified independent auditing team to Arizona in preparation for a potential forensic audit if the federal judge ordered it. This team arrived in Arizona on Wednesday night. Those team members have now returned to their headquarters because an appeal was filed in that case, and other litigation continues contesting the results of the general election. Election equipment would be considered evidence in any of these lawsuits. Until election litigation is completed, we cannot engage in any audits of the equipment unless ordered by a judge to do so. But when appropriate, and as the law permits, I am committed to supporting a forensic audit. The people of Maricopa County have ample reason to have confidence in their 2020 general election. The county's tabulation equipment is not connected to the internet. The hand count audit we are statutorily required to conduct showed 100% accuracy of the tabulation equipment. And this hand count audit was performed by members of each of the political parties. The logic and accuracy testing of the machines that we are statutorily required to perform before and after the election revealed absolutely no anomalies. I want to be clear. I have complete confidence and trust in the results of this election, and I am committed to further verification of this election so that others can learn about our process and have the same confidence that I have. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with the legislature and all the stakeholders as we continue to ensure and maintain confidence in Arizona elections. And before, that's my statement, and I think anybody on my board could have made that statement. We talk a lot as a board. I'm privileged to be chairman right now for another 23 days and 1 hour. Looking forward to seeing what the next chairman has. Ms. Eugenia Rita will be in charge of your committee that you chaired so well. And we'll have a new chairman to talk to her about that. But it's a complete, total privilege to be a leader this year with that board. I have found this board to be made of people with integrity, people of vision. I'm so happy to lead them, and I'm ready to take any questions you may have. And last, but certainly not least, I want my questions to be answered in a passionate way. I want it to be viewed that they are in a passionate way, but in no way are they defensive. This is where your job comes in. So I want you to know we're working with you, and I am here voluntarily. I did not need to be subpoenaed. I've talked to you, Senator Farnsworth. I've talked to many members, especially in my own district. Happy to be here. And some of the questions that you might have in the setting up of this hearing, also, Speaker Bowers had questions and concerns. Representative Ben Toma had questions and concerns, and I view this as the ability to speak to both houses of the legislature and hopefully get some questions answered or seek direction on which way to move forward. So with that, I'm ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll go to the Vice Chair, Rick Gray. I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to acknowledge that Mr. Hinkman is actually my supervisor, and we've had a lot of conversations, sometimes through text at 5:30 in the morning. If I remember one conversation we had. And so I want to thank you for your openness, your availability. I'm also thankful to hear, and I understand the constraints you have on when you have lawsuits in action that hinder you, but I'm glad to hear that you're looking at doing a forensic audit, as I've encouraged you to have, and 100% hand count, just so that our voters have a certainty that we know that this election was valid, because that's one of the concerns we have. So many people out there have so many concerns about the validity of this, and so I think it behooves us as elected officials to try and help them, see that it was valid. And so I look forward to, after these lawsuits getting over, to seeing that done. So thank you for your involvement, your accessibility, and your work with this.
Good, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will confirm that Maricopa has been very receptive to our inquiries and have met multiple times with leadership, and we've had very good discussions. Mr. Leach, did you have questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a number of questions, but I'm going to let it flow because I'm sure Senator Ugenti Reader has questions, and I'm sure the Vice Chair has questions also. Let me start by saying first of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hickman, for the work leading up to this. As people have alluded to, there have been many discussions going back to the 2% audit versus the 5% versus whatever percentage, but you have been engaged, your folks, representatives of the county, have as well as employees of the county, and they were civil meetings. They were to the point, and where they had to be, they were much pointed. So I want to start by in our discussions leading up to this, take me through, if you will, the accreditation process, because we've talked about, you've talked about an audit this morning, some type of audit, but the accreditation process, what all that entails, and specifically, you are accredited by state and federal, and what that means, and when it's done, prior to the election, if anything happens during the election, and then post accreditation and/or certification. That's kind of a big, large question, but I think you know where I'm going there. So I want to know what that accreditation process is, and does it expose any holes in the system where something out of the ordinary could happen?
So, Senator Leach, thank you for the question, and Mr. Chairman, also for all of you on the panel, you will be having a presentation by people that I consider top in the field when it comes to this. You're going to have the ability to talk to our elections director. So on technical questions that I think are best to be answered by our professionals, I'm going to defer that in hopefully the ability to keep things moving. I don't want to go into something that he could do a better job of answering in a technical field like that. So we currently have the elections day of elections director, Scott Jarrett, who's going to be making a presentation. I haven't seen his presentation. He might go into that with the presentation. So I'm gonna try to just say, Mr. Chairman, if there's questions I can answer, I will answer them. If there's not, that I think can be answered better, I'd rather defer to my people, and this is one of them.
What we're going to do is we're going to move to the presentation by Scott Jarrett. Again, he's the director of elections. So we'll do the presentation. That may answer some of the questions, and then we can get clarification. So why don't we do that?
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
I guess what I would like to do is also these people are going to be able to answer every question. If there's a question about processes that my board, blessed or looked into, I'm here to answer those questions to the best of my ability for my board and as chairman. So I would like, absolutely, if people have questions about what the Board of Supervisors can and cannot do, I would love to answer those questions. So I can also get on with my life a little bit. We've got a big county to run. We have the first vaccines are arriving through, and our public health is asking me questions about that. So I want to be there for them as well today, because it's a big.
This guy is
Yeah,
a
Mr. Chairman,
professional
we appreciate that.
smoke
We also
blower.
think this is a big day.
Just
but
like
it's
to put that out
important for us
there.
To have you present.
We're glad you're here, and we'll move as quickly as we can, but we want to make sure that we're as thorough as this committee wants to be. And having you present is obviously a positive factor. I do have a question before we go to the presentation.
Yeah.
And you made a comment, something to the effect that you are committed to doing a forensic audit after the litigation or when appropriate. I understand you're a board. You can't speak for the board because I don't believe that you have voted for that yet. Although you must have voted at some point because you said you had a forensic team that came in and then they left because of the appeal. So I guess my question is twofold. One is, was there a vote by the board to do a forensic audit? Okay, then I'll follow. I see you shaking your head no. So
No, there was no board, there was nothing on our agenda to speak to that. What you were saying with the forensic audit was within my purview as chairman to get things ready to go in case a audit was requested by a federal judge. I need to make sure I'm a businessman, and any good business, you put things in front as much as you can to enhance speed, and that's what occurred. My board didn't vote on that. I had the authority to do that on my own.
If the court ordered a forensic audit.
That is true. Now,
Okay.
Let me speak to that. If the federal judge would have said that, I don't even know what that judge would recognize as an independent team. I just wanted to have that judge have an option. That forensic audit team might not have been chosen, but we needed to have somebody in the state ready to go to be able to comply with that request. Number two, if the litigation would have stopped, it would have afforded me the ability to have a board meeting to put on the agenda and to discuss a forensic audit if there was no litigation. I had the opportunity to do that. It never transpired. We were immediately back in litigation at 9 a.m. the next morning.
I appreciate that clarification. Chairman Hickman, then you've stated that you have support, or you support a forensic audit at some point that you would deem appropriate. And as I take it, that's based on any kind of ongoing litigation. So let me ask you for a clarification. I recognize that your board has not voted. You support it. What is your feeling if this came before your board? Do you think that they would support? This is just speculation, I understand, but do you believe that the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors would support a forensic audit of the machines, the software, the ballots, whatever it is that is needed to instill confidence with the people?
To a man, all of us are seeking transparency, clarification, that will be consistent with what the law allows. That's why you guys are here right now. You guys make the law. We follow it. I just have a general feeling right now. I've taken no board vote, but just my feeling is all of us have been extremely interested to do a post-election report consisting of many items. Did our training work? Did our people work? Did our machinery work? We've done that over time and time again. I have a good feeling that all of my board members would seek a forensic audit of the machinery, up to and including providing due process to that machinery maker. Their name has been put in the public, but they've not had a chance to defend their name. So if that is a part of it, if that's a part of a hearing that we do, if that's a part of a hearing that the state legislature wants to bring, if that is a part where the U.S. Congress wants to bring, this company is I believe, I read somewhere, so I can only believe it partially because I just read, I haven't researched, but the company that provides the machinery and the software is, I believe, the second largest company that provides this to many states and many counties around the United States. So I am looking forward to see what Congress decides to do to bring clarity to this election.
I appreciate that. Okay, let's go ahead and move to the Mr. Leach, do you have something to that point? I want to get to the presentation,
I do,
but on this
Mr.
particular issue, go ahead.
I do, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Mr. Hickman, how long would that ought to take? If the appeal was dropped today, and taking travel out, if the auditors were on the ground, today is Monday, and if they started Tuesday morning, how long would it take?
Mr. Leach, it depends on what the legislature is asking for, and it depends on what the county is asking for. An independent forensic audit, I've been briefed that, and this is another question for Mr. Jarrett, but I have been briefed that an audit of the nature that we were assuming would occur if it occurred, if the federal judge saw evidence that compelled her to request a forensic audit, we were thinking that audit would take to look into their system and to make sure that it was counting and tabulating votes correctly with no anomalies. With the what we had in hand, we thought it would take about 16 hours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you. Were there other hands? Senator Ugenti Rita?
Yes. Please. Yep. Really quickly. Thank you so much. You talked about the audit not being agendized for your board meeting. Does that include executive session? Was an audit in any capacity talked about?
No. What we talked about were current election issues that were going on and where we were within the litigation and what steps that we could bring either to, basically to be a part of it with the county or not. There were lawsuits, I believe. Don't know if we've even intervened in all of them. One of the lawsuits, and again, that is what I'm going to allow our legal Tom Liddy to talk to with any questions. I don't want to get outside of my scope of executive session and what my board hears.
No, I appreciate that, and I do understand that. I was just wondering if it was agendized and discussed, not what specifically was discussed in the executive session, but if the conversation ever came up about an audit in executive session, just generally speaking.
I will,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Liddy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think as everyone understands, executive session, the content of those cannot be revealed by the chairman or any member, but the question by the senator was specifically about the agenda, and we can make that agenda item available to the committee. It's a public record. Okay,
and to that's wonderful. So was an audit not on that agenda? Like,
no, I mean, the agenda item said what the chairman said it was. There was going to be executive session to discuss the election-related litigation.
Okay. Great.
All right. Any other questions, Senator Ugenti Rita?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Farnsworth.
Okay. Anybody else before we go to presentations? All right. Let's go ahead and move to the presentation by, I believe, Scott
lady
Jarrett.
Looks like she has Mickey Mouse ears with those plates back there. Look at her.
Welcome, Mr. Jarrett.
We have to laugh. This is getting like, this is not exactly
Hello,
it's not
Mr.
exactly
Chairman.
Snorefest yet, but let's get it going.
Make sure I have the ability to share my screen. Mr. Chairman, can you see my presentation on the screen?
I can. Members, you can see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Great. Please proceed.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today. The Maricopa County Elections Department welcomes this scrutiny, and I welcome any opportunity to describe the incredible work of the Maricopa County Election Department employees. They are true American patriots who work tirelessly to host elections for the voters of Maricopa County. the candidates or measures that are on the ballot for the citizens of the great state of Arizona and for the Arizona State Legislature. Mr. Liddy also has a presentation and he'll be discussing we've had numerous court cases throughout this election process and after election day. And the evidence that was presented in those court hearings overwhelmingly show that the system used in Maricopa County is accurate, reliable, and secure. And I am absolutely confident in our processes and know that we conducted a reliable, accurate, and secure.
I have to interrupt this guy. The judges won't look at the evidence. They keep dismissing everything. So no, it doesn't prove anything.
With your permission, I would like to proceed with this presentation and answer any questions the committee may have for me during the presentation or afterwards.
Please proceed. I would ask members maybe during the presentation to mute your microphones unless you have a question, please. Mr. Jarrett, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in Maricopa County, in the face of a pandemic, we hosted an election with turnout percentages that had not been seen in 40 and 50 years. We had nearly 2,090,000 voters participate in the election with over 80% turnout. 991,000 of these voters or ballots were returned to us by mail. 209,000 of these ballots were voted in person, and 714,000 of these ballots were dropped off at a vote center or a drop box. And as I go through the presentation, I'll be describing our central count tabulation proceedings as well as our how we tabulate votes at each vote center. And those ballots that I just described, there were 1.9 million of those went through our central count tabulation processing. We also had 167,000 ballots that were tabulated at vote centers on election day. And it took a lot of effort, a lot of resources. I want to thank the Board of Supervisors for all the additional resources that they provided this election department. But I also want to acknowledge that it wasn't just the additional resources that helped us have a successful election. In many ways, it was the laws that were established by the legislature and some recent laws. And I want to take an opportunity to thank some of the members of the committee and yourself, Mr. Chairman, on some of those recent additions to legislation. So in 2019, Senator Ugenti Rita sponsored two bills that were instrumental in our success. SB 1054, this legislation allowed the counties to start tabulating ballots 14 days in advance. And this was a huge win for all counties, including Maricopa County, because it allowed us to start 7 days earlier than we had been allowed to prior. And this enabled us to be able to release results faster than we ever had before in Maricopa County. We had nearly 90% of all of our ballots released and tabulated by the Friday after the election. Also, Senate Bill 1090, the legislation allowed the Board of Supervisors to approve emergency voting locations. And this allowed 51,000 voters to vote in person before election day. These voters likely would have then voted on election day. Well, in the face of a pandemic, we recognized the need to be able to reduce crowds in our voting centers, reduce the lines that voters would stand in if they wanted to vote on election day. By being able to smooth out when voters voted and have them vote in that weekend before the election, it was a huge success and enabled those voters who wanted to vote and participate on election day. Also, Mr. Chairman Farnsworth, Senate Bill SB 1135, it was the first bill passed out of the 2020 legislative session. And it allowed for electronic adjudication. And this was incredibly important to the reliability of the Maricopa County election, but also how fast we were able to also tabulate results. And we just went through a court hearing case related to duplicated ballots. In Maricopa County in 2020, we had 27,000 duplicated ballots. I want to reflect back on 2018, a non-presidential election year, a gubernatorial election year, where we had 180,000 ballots that had to be manually outstacked. 135,000 of those ballots had to be duplicated. Many of those were related to voter intent issues. So we were able to reduce and only had to duplicate 27,000 as compared to 130,000 that we had to do in 2016. And that's directly related to this new legislation that was sponsored by yourself, passed through committee, and unanimously voted on by the state legislature in both the House and the Senate, as well as signed by the governor and the attorney general. So every metric that we use to calculate success in these elections show that we had an incredible election in Maricopa County. Not only do we look at historic turnout, we had fewer provisional ballots than we had in any prior election. Less overvoted ballots, less undervoted ballots. And I'll talk about what an overvote and undervote is further on in this presentation.
Before you proceed, Mr. Leach, did you have a question you wanted to ask now? Okay, you want to wait. Okay, please proceed.
We were able to count ballots faster and release results quicker than ever before. We had fewer late ballots returned and fewer ballots that were rejected due to signatures that did not match.
Let's pause on that one real quick. I'm not going to stop him. He can just keep going. They had fewer ballots that were tossed out because signatures didn't match.
That means that we need to establish a robust set of controls.
How did that happen? That's something to be proud of.
Early ballots are counted. Now,
did they check the signatures?
Have direct oversight on. But due to the wisdom of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and the Maricopa County Recorder, they partnered to provide seamless voting processes for Maricopa County voters. And through that, I've become aware and been able to see firsthand many of these controls that are implemented for early ballots. So I can speak to them at a high level, which I'll describe now. And the first step of an early ballot process is making sure that we only send ballots to registered voters. So we are required by state law to ensure and to compare any voter that registers with government systems, vital records. After we go through this process, we make sure we also send a voter a registration card. Now, this registration card is important for two things. It informs the voter, it confirms for them that they are registered. It also shows them what precinct they're registered in, confirms the address that they're registered at, confirms the name, the party that they're registered with. But it also serves another purpose. It serves a purpose for the recorder's office and the elections department to do one more security check before allowing that voter to vote. We send it to their address. And if that registration card comes back undeliverable, then we immediately send out another set of election mail that would then confirm whether that voter needs to be inactive or that registration not to be processed fully, to confirm that the validity of that registration process. The next thing that we do, and this is before any election, is we send out a 90-day notice through the mail to any voter. And this, again, the 90-day notice it allows the voter to confirm this is their the party that they're registered with, this is the address that they're registered at, and other information that is important to the voter. But it's also important as one of the security checks for the election process. This is what the county uses to identify if that voter may have moved. And if they have moved, again, similar to that voter registration card, we will send out within 2 days, a second piece of official mail to start that process to try to identify where that voter moved to, if they changed their address, or if they've moved out of state, and then that would inactivate their voter registration. We also, with every piece of our early ballots that go through the mail, we have a barcode, an intelligent barcode tracking system. This allows us to track that barcode to the voter's home. If a voter can call and they haven't received it on time, they're expecting it, they've gone on to our Be Ballot Ready tracking status, it shows that the ballot's been mailed. We can trace this to and find out exactly where it is in the post office delivery process. But it also allows us to be able to cancel a ballot. There are many times that a ballot can be lost or a voter damages that ballot and they need a replacement ballot. Well, then we can cancel that first ballot using that barcode and then issue them a new ballot. Or this is also how we track if an in-person voter, an early ballot recipient, they're on the Pebble, they decide that they want to go and vote in person. we can use this barcode then to cancel that ballot that was sent to them in the mail, so they can then have that ballot that they voted in person be their live actual ballot that gets counted and tabulated. We also perform a 100% signature check on every single early ballot. So this signature check process is a robust process. There's many different redundant layers over this process. So we have entry-level staff that go through a 4-hour plus training of how to verify signatures. They are reviewing these signatures. They're trained on how to validate those signatures. They look at many different things in addition to the signature. They're looking at the phone numbers that are put on there, how the handwriting.
I'm going to interrupt this guy, and I hope he doesn't make you mad. If you don't want my interruptions,
signatures on file.
I'm watching this on NTD. I take zero offense if you want to go over there so you can hear every little word that this dude is saying. I'm going to turn him down some more. All right, and here's why. I don't like to listen to liars. I will when I feel like it's useful. But I feel like I need to set this record straight as someone who has sat through, I don't know how many hours, I need to sit down and add them up, of hearings. And as someone who has been doing all of this research and listening to witnesses, it's fine for these officials to get up and to list all of the laws and to list all of the proper procedures, and then to say that because the proper laws and procedures are in place, that means that they actually were followed through. That's not what that means. As we have listened to countless witnesses through this entire process, we have heard time and time again where they are telling us these were the procedures and they weren't followed through. This was a procedure and it wasn't followed through. I sat and saw how signatures were not verified. They just pushed them through. The Arizona hearing that we watched on November 30th was mind-blowing. That hearing is why this hearing is supposed to be taking place. But the laws were not followed. So when we listen to these committees and all of these people sitting here, and time again, they're asking like, how can we do better? What laws can we change? And then we hear somebody like Miss Tarver in Michigan, and she says, no, the laws are already there. They're just not being followed.
Who is in that room when that decision is made?
So at the second level, it's one of our senior staff members. So this could be a supervisor, a manager that's making that decision. Now there are still multiple levels. So we would not make even after that second level review, it would take it going to a manager level review, a third level review to truly make that bad. But that's only after the cure period has been satisfied. So we're not making it before the election or even 2 days after the election. We would not make a signature bad. We've made every attempt. So after, and we log on the envelope itself how many attempts we made.
I'm turning him down again. You're supposed to log on the envelope, but we have heard from witnesses who said that didn't happen. I love what Steve says here in the chat on YouTube. Says exactly. That's like a murderer saying that they didn't commit murder because duh, it's illegal. I mean, this is insane.
And when does that come into play? When a ballot is determined to go into what stage of review, and if it's determined to not be acceptable as a valid vote.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Leach, the party representatives observe the process. They are not involved. So the political parties are able to assign observers to the signature verification process, the early voting process. I'll be discussing this in a little bit more detail further in the presentation, but also during the ballot tabulation center. But we hire Republicans and Democrats. We work with the parties to hire individuals that they would like to be involved in this process. So the individuals performing these reviews are Republicans, Democrats, independents performing the signature review process, but the political party observers, they're just there to observe.
Turning him down again. I'm sorry. I've got to say stuff, and we're just going to let him carry on there. We'll come back as needed. That was, again, that was actually a lie, because we have witness testimony that tells us that while that is what is supposed to happen, to be hiring a Democrat and a Republican, that is not what happened. And guess what? The observers were not allowed in to observe. There was no bipartisan observation. It did not happen. They were bullied, they were kicked out, and COVID was used as a tool to keep people from being able to watch meaningfully. On Facebook, Patty says, I agree, they have an agenda. They need to pat themselves on the back for stealing an election. She says they were incompetent and need to make it look as though they weren't. Brian says, what are people complaining about? Voter fraud is illegal. Exactly. Adeline thinks that this is only going to make Arizonans upset, especially the Maricopa people. Let me see. Let me check Periscope, see if there's any comments there I need to check out. By the way, but not showing any proof. I hear a lot of room for cheating, but not showing proof at all. Yep. I don't know which side you're on, but honestly, this guy's not showing proof. And they haven't given any opportunity to show proof of what we have seen in the past yet. We're just literally hearing, right now, we're hearing from the apologists of, I did everything right, I did nothing wrong.
Can you respond to that?
So, yes, Mr. Chairman. So your first question about us not allowing individuals in the room, and that's not true. We had more observers involved in observing the election process than ever before. We had members from both parties through in every room, pretty much the entire process.
You're lying.
We worked with the parties. So we met with the parties in early September, to describe all the different opportunities they would be allowed in which they could participate in observing through the selection process. So we had observers in every stage of the process, at the vote centers, following our couriers when we're picking up ballots from the process, or picking up ballots from those vote centers or drop boxes.
Wow.
We had observers in the EV processing rooms. That's where we separate the ballots from the envelopes. In the signature we had 2 rooms where signature verification was occurring. We had observers from both parties in those rooms. And then we also had observers in our ballot tabulation center. So it is not accurate, or those rumors are not true that we were not allowing observers in.
Whoa.
Now, under COVID-19,
That's, you must be calling all of these witnesses that we have heard from in Maricopa County liars. You're calling them all liars. That's not a rumor if someone sat there and confessed. That's not a rumor.
Every screen in the room, but they can overhear conversations between managers and supervisors. They could view many of the screens in the rooms. They could also hear us making calls to hear signatures with voters. Wow. So observation is not just a visual process. It's also what they hear, what they see, interactions between visual. Staff members and supervisors.
They're there to observe,
they were able to observe
the counting of the votes.
But we did also allow observers to bring binoculars if they wanted to get even a closer up view of votes.
Why were they having to be so far away they needed binoculars?
And then one last thing I'd like to say is we've had many court hearings where observers have provided testimony that they were able to observe. In that testimony in court, that they were able to walk through the process. They could view any computer screen they wanted. They could view 20 computer screens in one sitting. So in testimony in court, observers have stated that they were able to observe the process.
Okay, but are you going to list the observers who testified in court that they weren't able to see it?
By your own testimony just now, you stated that they were able to observe some of the screens, but not all of the screens, but they could listen. Listening is fine, but if you don't see the actual underlying ballot, how do you confirm just because you hear 2 people speaking? I don't understand that conclusion.
Thank you for this,
So,
Jay.
so Mr. Chairman, they were able to get a very good sampling by the screens that they could view to see if there were any issues or concerns through that signature verification.
Sampling.
Well, and I understand that. I think that's a faulty conclusion because when you're talking about anything that may be a misdeed or even less than fraud, just mistakes, if you can't verify all of the screens, if you can't verify all of the processes, then it leaves some doubt as to whether the validity of this process was uniform. Again, I'm not making any allegations of fraud, but I am suggesting that if the entire process could not be observed by somebody who's independent or representing a party, both parties, this is not just one party, but both parties, then I think we have at least a little bit of a flaw in the system.
So, and Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also discuss, we also went through a recent court hearing where a sampling of ballots was reviewed. And in that court hearing, the expert testimony from both parties said that the signatures that were reviewed through that process should identify, they did not identify a signature that would have resulted in a ballot not being counted. So even in a court hearing, the signature review process in Maricopa County, the evidence proved that we were doing our role and our job correctly.
With all due respect, as to that one particular provision, you've talked about all of the provisions that are in place, and so that testimony is referring to one particular provision of the process. Okay, please continue your presentation.
To that point,
Senator Michelle Svensson.
thank you. Is it muted?
Nope.
Oh,
We
okay,
can-
good. Oh, okay, excellent. Sorry, I can't tell. To Mr. Farnsworth's point, could you tell me where either in statute or in the elections procedural manual it outlines the authority to change the protocols for poll watchers? So in other words, I know you made some adjustments because of COVID-19. Did you have that discretion, or is it specifically outlined, or maybe there was an executive order that allowed for that discretion that didn't otherwise exist? Can you speak to that? And again, I'm just asking because I know that some adjustments were made because of COVID-19, and I wanted to understand the authority under which those adjustments were made.
Mr. Jarrett.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti-Rita, so I can take your question and research the exact provisions in the statute that speak to the observers in this process. But I will say, this is the first election that we had any political party observers want to look at signature verification, EV processing. Every election prior to this election, they did not even ask to be in the room. So we had more scrutiny over this election than any election in our history in Maricopa County.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, do you have it to that point?
Yes. I'm sorry, I had my hand raised. This is D'Alessandro. Isn't it true that the judge threw out the claim pertaining to observers not having a meaningful opportunity to observe? Didn't the court say if those problems happen, it should have been brought at the time of the issue rather than after the election canvass?
It was. No one would listen to them, Mickey Mouse ears.
Might not be part of your expertise, but is that not true that happened?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I believe you're correct, but Mr. Liddy is here and he will be providing a presentation as well. I believe he gets into those specific details.
Thank you so much.
It's going to be a long day of
And I
smoke
look forward to
blowing.
hearing from Mr. Liddy, but based on what was just stated by Senator D'Alessandro, that would be a procedural issue of having missed a time rather than the actual merits of the question. So with that, Mr. Jarrett, and I apologize to everybody, I can only see 5 people because I'm not controlling the screen. So I'll try to monitor better. Mr. Leach, do you have a question? Do you have it to that point? Your hand is up on the screen.
Oh, no, Mike, that was from before, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
No
The
problem.
electronics are eating me up. I'll get rid of it.
Okay, I already did. Senator Ugenti-Rita, do you want to continue?
I have other questions, but they're on other like ID issues. Jared,
Okay.
are you going to keep going with?
Yes, we'll continue with
Okay.
the presentation until people have questions. So Mr. Jarrett, please continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the last piece and really the last step after we go through that signature verification process is then bring those envelopes into, and we use bipartisan boards, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, separating those ballots from the envelopes, putting them into batches of 200, and then.
And we know that they were not, in fact, bipartisan boards based on testimony of people that were there who have signed affidavits to that effect.
So the next step of the process is voting in person. And this actually covers early voting in person as well as election day. So all voters, and this is a recent change as well out of the 2019 legislation, that all voters, whether they vote early or on election day, must show a valid ID. So in Maricopa County, we've established a site book check-in station to help expedite the check-in process. This is what really allowed us to manage the flow in our vote centers for the November election. We could have 9 to 15 people checking in simultaneously. However, there's a control process. There's a stopgap. Voters can scan their ID, but they can only progress so far until they have to show that ID to one of our poll workers. The site books do not let them progress until one of our poll workers comes up with a unique badge. They scan that badge. They are then required to log the type of ID in the site book that that voter showed before they're allowed to progress through and then have a ballot printed for them. We also, for this election, we went to a vote center model. Maricopa County, we have over 5,400 ballot styles. And we had to purchase ballot on demand printers to be able to provide that voter their correct ballot style. We use control slips that are printed from our site book check-in stations along with the ballot style to marry those up and to ensure that we give the voter their correct ballot style. Then, I think, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti-Rita has a question.
Okay, I don't see her hand up in here, but Senator Ugenti-Rita?
Okay, yes, thank you so much. Scott, what do you do to make sure federal-only ballots have a signature, or not a signature, but a ID check?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti-Rita, so for federal-only voters, actually there's additional steps and security measures for a Fed-only voter. So if you are a Fed-only voter, you cannot have a ballot mailed to you for your first election. You have to vote in person for the very first time.
Okay.
And then they would follow a very similar process as any other voter. They would have to show an ID, a valid ID, as required by state law to progress through the process and get a Fed-only vote, a Fed-only ballot. However, we had, I think it was right around 700 Fed-only provisional ballots that when a voter in this election came in and they said no, they demanded to vote a full ballot. They said that they were not a Fed-only voter. Well, because that status, because through that control slip, we knew that they were a Fed-only voter. They had not proved citizenship yet, that we printed them that if they demanded to vote that full ballot based on HAVA, we have to let them vote that full ballot. However, we do it through a provisional process. So we let them vote provisionally. And then that gives them the opportunity to cure that ballot. If they were able to come back and prove citizenship through that cure process, then that full ballot would have counted. If they did not prove citizenship, then we would have to duplicate those ballots and duplicate that ballot onto a Fed-only ballot. So yes, a Fed-only voter has to prove identity through the same process that any voter would through that check-in process.
Wonderful, thank you. That was helpful. Do you know offhand how many of those provisionals ultimately ended up being validated and voting a whole ballot?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti Rita, I don't know the exact number, but I know that there were 700 or so that we had to duplicate onto a Fed-only ballot. So those were provisionals.
Okay.
That the voter did
I'm
not
sorry.
come in
And it's not that I don't have patience, because I do, and I don't have ADD. But I want to keep your guys' attention. So I want to comment on some of this stuff, and I know that's a good guy and we could listen to him, but here's the deal. Once again, if you're just joining us, what we're listening to is a presentation kind of from the legal standpoint of, here are all of our laws and here are all of our statutes. And so, of course, because these laws and these statutes exist, no fraud could have happened. Okay? Now, I don't mind hearing from them. I don't mind having them kind of go through these explanations, because what it does do is show what the requirements actually were. So when you pair that up with the testimonies that we have heard, it kind of confirms how these laws and statutes were not followed as these officials seem to think that they were. Okay, so again, I don't really mind. It's kind of boring. It's really drawn out. I don't think that they would have brought this hearing. I mean, they fought really, 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 really hard, the Republicans, to get this hearing. I don't know how long it's going to last, and I don't know who we have to sit through before it starts to get good, but it has to get good at some point, or they wouldn't have been fighting so hard to get it. Okay? So we'll just have to see and wait. I'm pretty sure we're going to have witnesses. Now, if you'll recall, when we were in Georgia last week, it started out and we kind of had a whole, what was it, like 2 hours of kind of a hearing like this, where I'm sitting here with you guys and we're just kind of like snoring because nothing is coming out of it. And they aren't even providing any proof. They're just saying that this is how it went because these are our statutes. They're not providing proof or evidence. The only thing this guy had said was, well, we have in the court, we had people testifying that all of this was on the up and up, and they were allowed to observe and yada, yada, yada. That's not actually evidence. First of all, that's hearsay. And second of all, bring those people in. Like, I would like to hear from people in Arizona who are Republicans who say nothing bad happened to me in these counties that are in question. Okay, I was allowed to have meaningful access. I was able to see whatever I wanted to see. But so far, what has come out, very interestingly, is this little dude here did admit to the fact that people were only allowed to have access and see certain computer screens, but it's okay because they could always listen. Since when do we ever take, I was able to listen to check fraud or whatever? I mean, no, that's not how this works. So I hope that this guy's presentation ends quickly because I don't know how much more of this I can stand. I will be with you with it. I'm not shutting it off. We're not going anywhere, but it is a little bit boring and difficult to listen to, only because it's not actually giving us any information or proof. He's talking here about logs and chains of custody. I don't know if he's gotten there yet, but I'll be really interested to hear if he says we have all of the logs and the chain of custody. We have all of the proof that it wasn't broken, because we have testimony from people that says that it was, even in Maricopa County.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Leach,
and the fact that he keeps referring back to these people by name is a legal thing, and it's annoying.
Thank you.
And y'all know it is.
Thank you.
There's professional and then there's annoying. You do it like once or twice.
The issue of showing a valid ID. Showing a valid ID applies when you vote in person, which is what I generally like to do. I like the experience. But there are some concerns that we've expressed at the legislature for some years, and those have to do with, so tell me, do we require ID when we register to vote?
So when a member registers to vote, the process is that they have to prove citizenship and residency. So they would have to provide.
Hang on, I love this from Ellie Elf on Periscope. It's just, we did nothing wrong, but they needed binoculars to see what they could. Huh?
Through Service Arizona,
That's good.
Where the Service Arizona website validates their identity. The specifics of that do fall under the Maricopa County Recorder's Office, and they would be able to provide further details of the exact steps that we take to register votes.
Right, but I think there are alternative forms of identification that really aren't a birth certificate or an ID, if I'm not mistaken. That has been and continues to be a concern, and I recognize that may be in a little different office, but it goes to the point that I'm trying to get to the bottom of. So if we don't require adequate identification on registering to vote, then checking a signature on an early ballot assumes that the person who, when they registered, was justified in registering. They met the qualifications. They showed the alternate ID, which I don't think is secure enough, in my personal opinion. Is that accurate? So you wouldn't be checking the original, you wouldn't be checking to see if the person is actually a citizen, is able to vote legally. You're just basing it upon the registration. Is that correct?
So through the ID check for the early ballots, through the signature verification process, we are checking it to make sure that their signature matches. The registration process is what verifies that they were have residency in Arizona and that they have citizenship.
Right. Okay. So you confirmed what I just said. How do we and maybe I'll save this question for later. I've just written down a few questions that I'd like to understand. So how do we deal with the drop-off centers and the ID and the chain of custody in a drop-off center? My understanding is that there were a number of drop-off centers that were not manned. Again, I think the intent was valid to try to make it available to as many people as possible by having drop-off centers around the county. But my understanding is that they were not manned or monitored, and so they were simply picked up. Can you explain to me the chain of custody in those drop-off centers between the drop-off and getting to the elections department and verification of identity?
So, Mr. Chairman, so in Maricopa County, voters had the option to drop off their ballots at any one of our vote centers, which we had 175 on election day. The weekend before, we had 100 vote centers, or any one of our drop-off locations, which were in city government buildings, city clerk buildings, or drive-through drop boxes, which were manned by bipartisan staff members. So those ones specifically that you're referring to, the unmanned ones, those were in government facilities, city clerks' offices, town offices, some Maricopa County libraries. We had staff members, or there were government employees there to monitor. So this is required by the Elections Procedures Manual to have 100% supervision and security over that drop box while it's in that government building. Now we send out teams, courier teams. These are members of different parties to retrieve those ballots on a daily basis. When they retrieve those ballots from those drop boxes, they also have to do it with either the inspector if it's at a vote center or the appointee from the city clerk's office. They're opening those early ballot drop boxes. We have tamper evidence seals with serial numbers affixed to those boxes. They have to break those serial numbers. They have to log the serial numbers on what we call a ballot transfer custody form. They compare that the serial number from the day before matches what's still on that box to confirm that that box wasn't open between the route from the day before. They take those ballots out in the presence of that city clerk or the inspector. Again, we have our courier teams are 2-member teams of different parties. They transfer that to a transfer bin. They then affix that transfer bin with tamper evidence seals with security numbers. Those are logged on that ballot transfer custody form. When they put those ballots in that, they then reclose the early ballot.
All right, I'm going to interrupt him real quick before we get back to the other guy. Just to say this, I can't remember if this happened in Arizona, but I know in several other of these contested states, those seals were broken.
For this election, again, I mentioned,
and the logs cannot be reconciled.
with this process, we had political party observers following our couriers as they went through and performed these pickups. And then once those, when they followed them all the way back to our department headquarters here, our MCTEC Tabulation Center, and then we had a team reviewing those ballot transfer custody forms, making sure that the seals, when they returned, had not been removed, that they matched what was logged on those forms. And then we do 100% count of all those ballots, and then we leave those in our ballot vault until we take them to the next day to scan them in and to start the signature verification process.
Are you aware of any courier teams that were not made up of two individuals of different parties?
I am not aware, Mr. Chairman, I am not aware. I am aware that we had one complaint on the very first day of early voting when we sent out a team, a 2-member team, and that 2-member team did not both go into the vote center to retrieve the ballots. One member of the team stayed in the van and one member went inside, opened the ballot box in the presence of the inspector. They signed off on the form. That was not in accordance with our training. However, we corrected that for every future date after that first day of early voting. And that was only 1-member team. Mr. Chairman, I think you're on mute.
Yep, I appreciate that. Senator Ugenti Rita, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Scott, you already went over, and if we could just go back for a moment, the signature verification process. And I just wanted to get a little clarity. Tell me if I've got this right. So there's like a first round, and that's done by individuals who have roughly 4 hours of training. And if there's an issue with that signature, it goes to what we call like a second round, where someone else, a manager of some type, maybe even with more training, would then look at the issue and make a determination on what happens next. But on that first round, can you speak to how many signatures are okayed at that initial first round with the individuals who have the 4 hours of training?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti Rita, I don't have the specific numbers. I do know that about 1% on average for most elections go through and require a second round of review. But I do also want to add a little bit more clarity to that first round. Okay. So they can make a signature good, but we then do a 2% audit of every single signature that goes through and is basically determined as a good signature from that first round. And that's done by our manager level staff. And they're doing that to confirm that that first group, that first tier, is doing their jobs correctly. They can identify if there's any trends or patterns that are happening that first tier would not be doing correctly. And then they could then address that through training or identify if maybe we need to make a staffing decision. And through that audit process, we did not find any concerns within this election.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to sum up. So the vast majority of signatures are, for lack of a better technical term, okayed or deemed sufficient at that first level. There's a process if for whatever reason there's a process to manage the signatures that are not okayed, and then you have the backup of auditing a random sample of 2% from those individuals for quality control. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ugenti Rita, that is correct.
That repeat thing.
There are,
oh my God.
And as I described on the prior slide, there's still many other front-end controls that we use over this process, from the form of sending out those 90-day postcards, to make sure that those ballots were sent to the correct address. Every time we mail out a ballot, we do an address check verification to make sure that that is going to that voter. So and then voters add those phone numbers, and we can compare that phone number to the file, and we can even compare the handwriting on the phone number itself.
We're going to get through this, team.
But the vast majority
today.
are being okayed at that
You
first
and me.
round. That's just what I was getting at.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, you're correct.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for
Stop with the
clarification.
repeating.
Thank you. Mr. Leach, your digital hand is up. Do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jarrett, let me switch a little bit. There have been allegations around the country regarding that the power was shut off at some of the voting centers in some of the states, or the ballot. I shouldn't say voting centers. I should say the ballot tabulating areas. Did that happen in Arizona at all, to your knowledge?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Leach, no, it did not happen in Maricopa County, to my knowledge.
So the follow-up, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, we saw spikes in the vote, what people are reporting as spikes in the vote counts. If there wasn't, in fact, any shutdowns, what would you say about the spikes, and why are we seeing the spikes in the vote counts?
He's getting right to the
So,
chase.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Leach, Maricopa County, there were no spikes. And in fact, once you go through the analysis, and actually Mr. Liddy will include some of this in his presentation, every single data reporting after Election Day describes the opposite of what those spikes are saying. They're saying that there was unusual spikes in the favor of Biden. In Maricopa County, actually nearly every single report subsequent to Election Day favored President Trump. And I can just tell you most likely why that was. So in Maricopa County, the vast majority of our early voting, especially those first few weeks of early voting through mail and in person, Democrats were turning out in much higher numbers than Republicans were. But as we got to the tail end of early voting, Republicans started coming out, and they actually surpassed the early turnout for what Democrats turned out for. Now, when we reported results at 8 p.m. on election night, those were just early ballots. And at that point in time, we were through the Friday before the election. So that's what the ballots that we reported at 8 p.m. on election night were everything that we had received by early morning on Friday. Well, the vast majority of those include more Democrats than Republicans. But then as we reported results on Wednesday, the day after the election, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, those were ballots from Friday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then what were returned as late earlies on Tuesday. So those were all then where predominantly those were including Republican ballots. So the spikes that have been described are not consistent with what we see in Maricopa County.
Mr. Chairman, those ballots, and Scott, those ballots that were counted Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, after Election Day, what is the chain of custody? How are those held and protected? Who has access? Who doesn't have access? In what form are they held, and how are they protected so that numbers can't increase or decrease?
So those ballots, until they are signature verified, are kept in the envelope, and they are stored in a vault with our vendor that scans these in for us and scans those signature. That's at Runbeck. So they're held in a vault. We have a sheriff's deputy at our Runbeck vendor maintaining that chain of custody. As soon as those ballots go through a signature verification, they are either approved that with a good signature, then those are transmitted and transferred to us. We send over a 2-member team to pick up those ballots and bring those ballots to our McTech tabulation center. Then they go through a bipartisan board where they separate those ballots from the envelope.
Which we know full well that those boards were not bipartisan based on witness testimony. I'm going to read a couple of comments here while this guy continues to blow smoke here. Ann says, yeah, it is the defunded police. What idiots. I was thinking of moving, but I'm afraid wherever I go, they will move to my area. Ha. Kite Man says, Arizona hearing. Arizona not hearing. Dale wants to know, I thought the election was on Tuesday. Why are you still getting ballots on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then again Monday and Tuesday, etc.? A Boydo says people who respond as he is are well known to sway or lie when testifying, and I have seen that too. It's not just it's in any kind of thing, even if you're in like a board meeting or whatever, when people try to respond in that official capacity, they're trying to pull something. Applemark says, I'm nodding off. I feel you there. We have got to get through this guy in this presentation. Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my mind.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
I can.
So when those EV processing boards are doing their inspection of the ballots, so they're separating those envelopes or separating the ballots from the envelopes, they're also looking for damaged ballots. So a ballot that might be torn. So then those might go into a separate batch because those can't be read by our tabulators. But then there's a separate transmittal tracking slip that would then send that to our tabulation team. So every single ballot is accounted for constantly, and we could verify and confirm that no ballots would be inserted into that process.
And while, Mr. Chairman, and while everybody's entitled to a private ballot, there is identification marks on there referring to precinct. Is that not correct?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that is correct. That we do have a code on there that it can be traced back to the specific precinct in which a voter voted that ballot or where they live.
And Mr. Chairman, one final question in this segment is, should there be an audit sooner or later? Would any interruption of power or any interruption of the vote tabulator show up on an audit process?
Mr. Chairman, members, it would depend on the specifics of exactly what the audit reviewed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Please proceed. Mr. Jarrett, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was through the first two bullet points on this slide.
Please
those
say
related
there's only
to
two.
both election day and early voting. And then
Oh, you
I
mean
was
on
going to
this
describe
We gotta
step
go through
2A
this
in this
one
process, but
and this
because
one.
that related to how we transferred ballots from vote centers and drop boxes. But based on your question, Mr. Chairman, I've already described that process. So then the next piece would be just for election day. So we only use our precinct-based tabulators on election day. And this is actually comes out of statute because every early ballot must go through a signature verification process. So that's why we do not use our tabulators prior to election day. And also for security reasons, we do not use our tabulators prior to election day. So our tabulators are programmed only to read election day ballot files. We do this for many reasons, because there could be some voters that would bring in their early ballot and try to have their early ballot counted. Our tabulator wouldn't read it. There's also voters that may be upset that they were given a provisional ballot and they don't insert their provisional ballot in the envelope, and then they might try to insert that into the tabulator. Well, that would our tabulators would not accept a provisional ballot or an early ballot in our vote centers. Our tabulators also use 2 memory cards per tabulator. Now these memory cards are encrypted. They also have to be programmed at the exact same time in our ballot tabulation center. So you have to have access to our ballot tabulation center. You have to program those 2 cards at the exact same time, otherwise the tabulator won't work. And then we insert those memory cards into the tabulators. Those external ports are affixed with tamper evident seals, so we would know if anyone tried to tamper with those memory card slots while those tabulators are out at our vote centers. We create a precinct ballot report where those seals are logged Our poll workers then compare that those seals are accurate when they're opening the polls. We also have a security key, a fob key. So in order to turn on those tabulators and open the polls, they have to have that physical security key, and they have to have a password that we've given our poll workers before they can open those polls and they're ready to use on election day. We also then have our poll workers run what we call a zero tape. So they run a tape. It's like an old-fashioned tape register. It prints out from the precinct or from the precinct-based tabulator. And it shows that every contest, that's programmed in this election has a 0 vote. And our poll workers review that report, that receipt tape, and then they sign off on that ballot custody report, verify.
I love what Brian says here on Facebook. The Borg is adapting to our inquiry. That's a Star Trek joke. That's pretty good.
They will, again, and all of this is done by 2 poll workers at different parties. They will go to that tabulator. They will run actually the results tape. They sign off on that results tape, how every ballot was tabulated through election day. They also write the total number of ballots that were tabulated on that precinct ballot report. They sign off on that report. They then remove one of those memory cards. They break the seal. They log that seal number again on that precinct ballot report. They take that memory card, put it in a little container that we provide them, put it in a bubble pack, and then we have 2 members.
Curious Man says he's giving a really good description of what should happen, not what did happen.
They put them in a black canvas bag. They seal that black canvas bag with a tamper evidence seal. That tamper evidence seal, that number is logged on that ballot custody report. So those ballots, that one single memory card, and any other critical documents that we need, like that ballot custody report, are then transferred to one of our receiving sites in Maricopa County. Our receiving sites are staffed with members from different parties. In this election, we used actually county employees from any one of our 50 county departments, and we made sure that they're from different parties. We also had MCSO sheriff deputies providing security over every receiving site. When those trucks left that receiving site and came back to McTech, our tabulation center, they were escorted by 2 sheriff's deputies cars, sheriff deputy patrol vehicles with patrol deputies in those cars, ensuring the chain of custody all the way from the receiving site to McTech. Once those cards and those ballots are received by McTech, we do an inventory. We confirm that the seal numbers match. We bring those into our tabulation center. There's political party observers that were here present through that entire process, observing how we read in those memory cards on election night.
Apple Mark, I don't sugar crack.
Mr. Chairman, any questions before I move on to the next slide and talk about the tabulation process?
Any questions by the committee members? Mr. Borelli.
Unmute. Let me see my notes here.
Into your note, you actually have notes? Because I don't.
Were any of the ballots printed by a commercial printer at all? Mr. Chairman and Mr. Elections guy.
Mr. Garrett.
He got him, Mr. Elections
Mr. Chairman,
guy.
Senator Borelli. So we, yes, we do have commercial printers that we use. We stress test every single one of our printers when testing them and readying them for this election. We have 3 different printers. One is Lexmark and 2 others are from Oki. And we use those printers to print those ballots on demand in our vote centers.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry, I forget your name, sir.
It's Mr. Jarrett.
Mr. Jarrett, yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Jarrett.
Mr. Jarrett.
So, but everything is printed on site? Nothing is printed outside sources?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Borelli, so for 171 of our vote centers, 100% of the ballots were printed through our ballot on demand printers. We had 4 vote centers where we did send pre-printed ballots to those voting locations. And those 4 vote centers, one was in Aguila, One was in Rio Verde, so it's north of Fountain Hills area. One was in Gaka Village on the Tohono O'odham Nation, and one was in San Lucie. And the reason we sent those 4 locations pre-printed ballots is it's very unlikely that a voter, out-of-precinct voter, would vote at those locations. And if an out-of-precinct voter did vote, we could have them vote on our accessible voting device. And the reason we made that decision is we wanted to expand the amount of vote centers that we could offer in this location. We were constrained by the number of ballot-on-demand printers that we could get due to COVID-19. The supply chain, we could only get enough to serve right around 170 voting locations. By not putting ballot-on-demand printers in those 4 locations, we were able to actually expand up to 175 voting locations.
Yes, so another follow-up question. So, Mr. Jarrett, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jarrett, did the county use run-back printing? Do they have a contract with run-back printing for Maricopa County ballots?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Borelli, yes, that is correct. We use run-back, and they print all of our early ballots that go out through the mail.
Right, and of course, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Jarrett, and everything that goes out in the mail, everything is folded, correct?
Here it comes.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes, that's correct. In order for, we have a 19-inch ballot, and the only way for it to fit in the envelope that we mail to voters is to fold that ballot.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I have another follow-up. On a provisional ballot, you know, because some folks, they show up, they got their one they mailed in ballot or whatever, and or they didn't have it. They said that, you know, there'd been cases where someone said, well, somebody already voted for you, you're on the early ballot list, and then of course they say, I don't want to vote by mail, I want to do it in person. Are they handed a provisional ballot flat, pristine, or is that also folded in a pre-stuffed envelope?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Borelli, if they have not returned their early ballot, and we can confirm that through our sitebook check-in station, that voter would be issued actually a regular ballot, and we would cancel that early ballot. So, and that's one of the reasons we have so few provisional ballots in Maricopa County, in addition to the vote centers that we use.
Yes.
So, but if a voter, any provisional voter, comes into our voting location, that ballot is printed using one of our ballot-on-demand printers, and a provisional ballot envelope is also printed.
Ballot-on-demand printers.
And our poll workers are trained to guide them on how to fold the ballot so it will fit into the provisional ballot envelope.
Right, okay, so either way, they're going to have a folded ballot going in an envelope, and nothing is pristine, flat, and goes right directly into a machine, because everything is
Good guy.
put in an envelope and sent to the tabulating center, correct?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Borelli, so if you vote using election day ballot, those are not folded, but any ballot that does go into an envelope is folded.
Okay. Thank
Whether
you.
that be an early ballot or a provisional ballot.
Well, because if they show up at the polling center, they're going to show an ID, they're going to be given a ballot, but if there's a provisional that needs to be, obviously, later on, it's stuffed in a ballot. So my next question is on the adjudicated ballots, where, you know, there's a coffee stain on one ballot, they get sent in via mail, however, and they have to do adjudication and obviously, you know, swap vote for vote, you know, and it's all observed. Is that ballot also folded, or is that run through pristine, non-folded?
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Borelli, so yes, we have a variety of reasons why we might have to duplicate a ballot. And so I think that's the process you're describing. And that's when we have, and those reasons could be because they are uniform overseas and military members, right? They return ballots to us through a secure portal. We had about so we had just over 27,000 ballots that we had to duplicate for this election. Okay. A little over 9,000 of those were those Uokava ballots. We also had Braille ballots. We had special election board ballots, which are large print ballots that we mail out to voters. but
They do.
they then could be those damaged ballots, so they're torn,
Alright.
there's a coffee spill.
We're gonna just turn this guy down. Leah wanted to give an update.
Yeah, because this is
I'm on my last Smartie anyway.
This is monotonous and it's hard to get through, and
My
you guys
last
want a
one.
little pick me up.
That's what the
Because
Smartie was for.
no, you need something better than that. All right,
I'm gonna have to bring down more candy. Do we own any more candy?
Judge has allowed. Did you tell them?
No,
that-
I was getting to, but I couldn't interrupt this riveting.
All right, Dominion's forensic result in just Antrim County.
Here it comes.
You guys remember we reported on this. We had a constitutional lawyer and Bill Bailey. Somebody Bailey.
Won't you come home, Bill Bailey? Won't you come home? I learned that in 7th grade. Won't you come home, Bill Bailey?
All right, so they had 7 IT experts look at the Dominion systems and do a forensic audit on the ones in Antrim County, 22 machines. And the Attorney General blocked the report. Now, we were waiting to see if the judge would release that report today. And yes, they were allowed to be released. So I would like to read a little bit about them. County clerk, there is a wonderful thread here, and I'm going to try to
This
get
is
this
in
thread.
Michigan.
This is in Michigan, yeah. This is a national security threat. Security group says it audited machines, and it is a national security threat. So the Dominion machines are intentionally and purposefully designed with inherent errors. We conclude that the Dominion voting system is intentionally and purposefully designed with inherent errors to create systemic fraud and influence election results. The system intentionally generates an enormously high number of ballot errors. The electronic ballots are then transferred for adjudication. Abnormally amount of ballot errors.
Abnormally.
Yeah. The intentional errors lead to bulk adjudication of ballots.
Who's calling?
All day I keep getting calls.
You were talking to somebody for like an hour up there.
Somebody that we know has somebody that they know who has COVID and wants to go to AmericaFrontlineDoctors.com to be prescribed with hydroxychloroquine.
Oh, okay.
The intentional errors lead to bulk adjudication of ballots with no oversight, no transparency, and no audit trail. This leads to voter and election fraud. Previous years, there are on file the adjudication audit trails. You can find the adjudication and you can find it.
Yeah.
2020 has been wiped.
Whoa. By the software, like it's put into the software to just wipe it automatically, or someone went in there and wiped these ones?
I don't know. They're just missing. You can't find who adjudicated, when they adjudicated, and how they adjudicated. Okay. So let's see. Later in the report, Allied Security Operations in no uncertain terms.
Right there? I can get her if she is.
Yeah, probably. Described Dominion's involvement in the elections as a national security imperative. And let's see. All right, there's a couple more things. This is breaking.
So this is just the report. We're not being given any actual like evidence because it's a national security. It's going to have to go to.
See, this demonstrates conclusively the votes can be and were changed. Well, they actually have proof. That, remember you said that the error rate was 1 in 250,000.
That's the acceptable error rate.
That's like 0.000003%.
Mm-hmm.
68.5% were adjudicated. It had an error. I'm sorry, had an error. 68.5%.
Wow.
This demonstrates conclusively that votes can and were changed during the second machine count after the software update.
Wow.
That should be impossible, especially at such a high percentage to votes cast. This is from the Dominion report.
I'm curious, and I so I don't lose this thought. The AG did not want to release this report, the Attorney General, okay? Did she know what was in the report when she didn't want it released? Or do you think she was just scared and she suspected what was in the report?
2 different USB sticks were used to program the tabulators to count ballots. The audit got different ballot counts by using different sticks. The county clerk reruns the ballot using different software version. 60% of the results in small races get altered. This resulted in greater than 60% change in voting results, in explicitly impacting every single election contest in a township with less than 1,500 voters. So the one thing that we saw was 600 votes added to the
school board.
School board.
They were supposed to be 6 and 3, and they put 663.
So we estimate 1,474 votes changed across the two rolls. Between the first and the second time, the exact same ballots were run through the vote counting machine, which is almost the same number of voters that voted in total. This demonstrates conclusively that votes can be and were changed. Let's see, because the same machines and software are used in 48 other counties in Michigan, this casts doubt on the integrity of the entire election in the state of Michigan. Based on preliminary results, we conclude that the errors are so significant that they call into question the integrity and legitimacy of the results in Antrim County 2020 election, to the point the results are not certifiable and not just human error, because those USBs create two different numbers.
Yeah.
That's not a human error.
Right.
Okay. Our findings show that the Central Lake Township tabulator tape totals were significantly altered by using two different program versions, the October 23rd, 2020 and the November 5th, 2020, both of which were software changes during the election, which violates election law and not just human error associated with the Dominion election management system. I would like to also explain something to you.
So I'm confused though.
Okay.
You were saying that when you use, and obviously I'm so not a technical person. I guess I am more than most, but not at this level. The sticks are counting votes that are in the system.
So the you run the ballots through.
Yes.
And then you pull out what the numbers were on the USB stick.
Right.
So when the USBs were run on the two different counting dates, they produce two different numbers. When you run the ballots through.
But the IT people didn't have access to ballots.
I don't think so.
No, they were just pulling out.
Right. Right. So the election event designer log shows that Dominion ImageCast precinct cards were programmed with new ballot programming on October 23rd and then again after the election on 11/5. Why was there new software in the Dominion machines on November 5th?
Wait.
Let's see here.
Jeez, scare me. My monitor went to
Removal
sleep.
of these files. Okay, so here we have. There's so much here, guys. It keeps coming.
If you're joining us, we are. I can't. I don't mind Leah interrupting, because this guy behind Leah's head, Mr. Elections guy, his whole sole purpose of being here is to
nothing to
say,
see here.
Well, yes, nothing to see here. But my interpretation of his whole sole purpose for our side is literally to just show us how it should have happened.
Yeah.
It should have gone this way.
Sure, exactly.
Didn't happen, but it should have.
Okay. Quote, likewise, all security logs prior to 11 p.m. on November 4th are missing.
What? Say that again, because I was reading the comment.
Likewise, all server security logs prior to 11:03 on November 4th are missing. This means that all security logs for the day after the election, on election day, and prior to election day are gone. Other server logs before November 4th, 2020 are present. Therefore, there is no reasonable explanation for the security logs to be missing. In previous elections, the logs are still there. but not for our election, not for 2020's election.
Right.
Removal of these files violates state law and prevents a meaningful audit. Even if the secretary wanted to conduct an audit. Remember when we had Jesse Jacobs, the beautiful, wonderful Indian American immigrant, who said when she was going to adjudicate a ballot, she was going to have to sign her name to it because there would be an audit trail.
Right.
And it would come up in the system. This ballot was adjudicated and who adjudicated it. That's not in here.
Whoa.
Okay. All right. I think that's that. But on another.
Wait, because I have comments on that. So this is going to go straight to the top.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
If the DOJ does not step in to investigate this, I'm making a prediction here and right now. Trump overrides the DOJ pretty much. Oops, there goes my pen for my important notes for election guy. And we're just going to bypass all of it altogether.
Yeah.
It's going to be investigated. This is not getting swept under the rug. Okay? If the DOJ was smart and they still wanted to manipulate this whole thing, they'd take up the investigation so that they could do their sleight of hand in it. Right. I'm not sure they will.
Sidney Powell has alerted the Supreme Court of new evidence filed in her Michigan case. On Sunday, she alerted the Supreme Court of new evidence filed in her legal team's Michigan lawsuit related to the state's Dominion voting system's voting equipment as she called on the court to intervene in her cases. Powell, in a letter, notified the court of 2 batches of recently obtained evidence, the first of which she said came from an initial forensic analysis of Dominion's voting machines in Michigan's Antrim County that was prepared under protective order.
So it's related to this.
She must have been allowed to get this, to get the results before it was released publicly.
Right. I'm sorry, Patty, this is in Michigan. We're still talking about Michigan.
Antrim County, where the votes switched. And if it wasn't for a school board that was tied and was run through, you would not have found that 6,000 votes were flipped from President Trump to Joe Biden. That is that's not something to wipe under the rug. And finding out it was not human error, but it was computer error.
Problem.
Then every single machine has to be forensically audited.
Yep.
This is the little county
that saved America.
Okay. So biological extrapolation.
Whatever.
It's extrapolation. Explains voting anomalies and advises fraud throughout the Dominion voting system. The new evidence specifically provides additional and conclusive evidence of election fraud and irregularities. The final certified tally in Michigan.
I'm glad Sydney has this information. Whoever got the information to Sydney is awesome.
Yeah. So here's the thing.
The
word that the Lord gave me, and we are relying on crazy Christian stuff, no matter what Beth Moore and her crazy friends say about us being crazy. Beth Moore came out and it blasted us all for.
Does anyone really care?
Yeah, it was. I told a friend of mine though, what makes it worse is that you're in the Christian ranks and she turns her sword over and she just like pokes you.
I know.
And it's pretty bad. Basically saying we're like spreading witchcraft or something weird like that. Which I would say you're being led by Satan, but we don't want to throw around who's being led by Satan.
Maybe a short little video. If not, we'll be back tomorrow. Ollie said that they're going to do a press conference. Really big deal. I don't know what it's going to say, what they're going to talk about. Nothing. I don't know, but we'll cover it. We'll be here or be square. And a lot's going to keep coming down the line. I do know that our Senate, our big Senate, is supposed to have a hearing on the 16th about election irregularities. So I need to get more information on that. I'll give it to you tomorrow as far as us covering that. So
well, if it goes the way of all the
well, we'll still cover it.
Of the Facebook hearings,
well, yeah, I know, but that one we will still cover. We don't cover the Facebook hearings live and all that junk. But all right, you guys, have a good night. Be blessed. We'll be back at some point, but for sure on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and on Sunday at 1. Please be following us
We have
on
a PO box,
resistancechicks.com.
107, Milford, Ohio 45150. Yeah, follow us on resistancechicks.com.
Yeah. 107 Milford, Ohio 45150. If you send us your letters, we will read them on air. So good night. God bless. Elvis has left the building. Be really excited. I think you should walk away from today. I kind of feel like got all this work done today. I feel really good about it. Really excited about
Prince
everything
Charles
that's come
is
out.
the great reset prince. He just is. So that you're fine with saying that.
Right. All right. We love you guys. Bye.
I was called